Thank you so much. Just uniquely a woman's color, and it's a cami background, so it combines being a woman and being a military spouse, and it's just a unique tradition in finer womanhood to be a military spouse. My dad was a senior master sergeant in the United States Air Force. We traveled all over the world. Wherever his orders sent us, that was home. My fondest memories are of Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, where we were assigned when I was very young, and we lived on both on the economy and on base. And probably Plattsburgh, New York, which was our last assignment. Remember hearing the 12 o'clock whistle ring, and that would bring my dad home for lunch. So I had many fond memories of the military. While he was on active duty, probably 2 years might have been the longest, and on average that's how often a military family moves. A child of the military may move 13 times during the military member's career. She was not professionally trained, but she certainly worked in the family's, one of the three families' restaurants for any number of years. When my father retired, in Plattsburgh, New York, we were there for an extended period of time, and they managed to own a restaurant complex that included a roadside barbecue stand, a soul food restaurant, and a Chinese restaurant. And my mother mastered all three of those cooking styles, and at one time or other operated all three restaurants. I have no idea. The restaurants were there, and they bought them from another black couple. I certainly did. Not only my love of cooking, but my love of cooking diverse types of food. When I grew up, and you're too young to remember this, the kitchen was geographically dislocated from the rest of the house. And so the cook was by herself on holidays, etc. And to get someone in the kitchen with her to keep her company, my mom told stories. And so I helped her do the things she didn't want to do, like cut onions up and stuff like that. But I always associated storytelling with cooking, and I think that's the genesis of all of my books, is there's some type of, especially with women, we share our culture and bond around the process of preparing meals. So I've always enjoyed doing that. The opportunity once again presented itself. I met a young man in college who was in ROTC, and he said to me, "Hey, we're both going to have to work, so you probably want to get into this Air Force ROTC program yourself so that you can always have a job." After being on active duty for a period of time, I was involved in a motor vehicle accident and medically discharged, and did not have the security of having a job on active duty. And during that time, they assigned husband and wives together, so you didn't worry about being separated. So I needed a portable career, one that I could pack up with me and travel with, and the opportunity again presented itself with those books. There was a short-lived law career after my motor vehicle accident. The military sent me to law school as a part of their vocational rehabilitation program. And immediately after law school, I clerked for Chief Justice of the Colorado State Supreme Court, and from there went on to practice law as a prosecuting attorney in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And then, as with most military spouses, the inevitable orders arrived, and I had to pack up that career and find another one. That's a long story, but I just happened to look up one day. We were taking our placement tests. He walked through the door. I'd been up all night with my girlfriend discussing the guys that we were going to date in college. It was our freshman year. He didn't meet any of the qualifications. And I said, "He looks like he'd make someone a great husband." And I put my head back down and didn't think any more of it. And lo and behold, 3 years later, we were married. Had I known that his name was Tillery, I would have scratched him off my list. Just that one look. We were in Montgomery, Alabama, where he was attending Air Command and Staff College. I thought that I was going to expand a law review article on the death penalty into a book, and it was very depressing. And to to decompress in the evenings, I would start tinkering with some of my mom's old recipes because we were in the South and the ingredients were readily available. And we were near Tuskegee University. Now it was Tuskegee Institute at the time I attended, and visiting quite frequently because we had the opportunity. It was only an hour away. And I started associating the recipes with the stories of Tuskegee's founding and Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver and the whole agricultural movement of that era. Tied those two together, and that was my first book, the African American Heritage Cookbook. I do a lot of research online, and after I've finished researching online and have a general feel for the history of a place, I go to that place to discover the culture, and then to the Library of Congress is where I get the photographs, the images that go into the book. But I'm often surprised to find something different when I actually visit the location than what I imagined from their history, the little tidbits that you pick up in a student's letter or diary excerpt, or just by reading a student newspaper from that period. Oh, my favorite story probably is the funniest one, and that's Frances Rowe, who found herself on the Indiana frontier, and she was ranked out of her house not once but twice. For those not familiar with the concept, if someone moves into the fort that outranks your spouse, then you give up your house, and it goes all the way down the line until everybody has settled in again. So the first time she's ranked out, and many military spouses can identify with this, her husband was unavailable to come and help her. So she had to throw everything large and small off a side porch and sat in that side lot as the new officer arrived at 1 o'clock precisely. 10 years later, the same thing happens to her, except this time that the officer said, "Oh, we're not going to bother you. You're safe. Stay in your house." After she'd finished winterizing the house, polishing, whatever it is that you do to a cabin at that time, the officer decides that he wants that house, that particular house. And she said she'd made up her mind to one thing, and it would be unalterable, that the little dinner that she'd planned for this officer and his wife, they would not enjoy. She would give it to someone who had a little less honey to dispense. And so that's the one that I enjoyed the most. Years later, she met Jefferson Davis, though, and writes about that as well. They come from a variety of sources. I have some that were passed on to me by friends, and I made them my own with changes in them, like the worrisome lasagna on page 182, and most of them are mine. I do. I cook for fun and entertainment, and especially enjoy entertaining, and I think that's just part of the heritage of being a military spouse that I grew up with. Very seldom. I think it's a bonding, a type of bonding that takes place. We're an immigrant nation, and so there's no unique American cuisine. It's very little of it is unique to America. It's been influenced by immigrants and the natives as well as the geography. I think that today, with the plethora of ethnic restaurants all across the country, you have an opportunity to sample not only the cuisine but the culture of another country. I think that in certain homes it still does have that importance, especially in military homes where we travel so much. Often there was no, women weren't on orders. The only way that women could join their husbands is as a camp follower, so there was no per diem for them or anything else. So if a woman came in off of the trail and her clothes were threadbare, they'd hold a sewing bee and sew her a new wardrobe. You would think that these women would only cook and maintain the home, but many of these women were caught up in the actual fighting. Margaret Corbin was standing by her husband's side at a cannon, and that time women poured the water on the cannons to cool them down. And I would imagine that's what she was doing. When her husband was shot dead, she took his place behind the cannon, continued firing the cannon until the battle was won. As a result of her heroic efforts, Congress passed a resolution awarding her 1/2 a soldier's pay, as well as a new suit of clothing or the monetary value thereof. Angelica Vrooman, while the bullets of battle were flying over her head, sat calmly in a tent making lead bullets. So we have examples of a number of these women actually participating in battle. A lot of faceless, nameless women had cartridges in their pinned-up aprons, which they ran, and stood by to pick up the colors should they fall, in addition to serving as cooks and as doctors and nurses during that period. It's a forgotten history, but it's readily available. A number of the women were educated, so they kept diaries as well as wrote books. Libby Custer wrote books to support herself after her husband's death at Little Bighorn. I think the basic culture has remained the same, a culture of taking care of our own and supporting each other through the various phases of deployment, etc. So that culture has remained true throughout the years. Well, yeah, I can see that coming. I think it's a super idea. It brings to the forefront the importance of nutrition and children's participation in that, because, you know, she had school children help with that. I support it wholeheartedly. I think we do need to go back to a time where you're not transporting food so far to the table, and as a result, you have better food products. So I'm looking forward to that. I know they have a farmer's market here in Tampa and would like to see that receive more recognition. One of the things that I do is I compile recipes because I forget them for a personal family cookbook, and it's a great idea that you share with your kids and collect those recipes, collect those family pictures, those family stories, and pass them on as a wedding gift or a graduation gift to the next generation. It's very important that they have their own traditions, because increasingly, not just the military, but all of America is becoming a more mobile society. To a certain degree, possibly, but not as much as many would think. I remember after my grandmother's from Tampa, from Ybor City, and my cousin and I would walk to school, and the deviled crab man would sell deviled crabs for a quarter. And for years and years, I tried to find that. When I returned to Tampa, I found the recipe online and have been practicing with it since. And it brought back a wealth of memories to me. So I like that I can get online and Google and find what I thought was a lost but cherished recipe. I don't. It's whatever I'm in the mood for, and my mom and my travels have prepared me to cook anything from Thai food to Korean to Chinese to just down-home Southern cooking. I enjoy them all. Family, friends, the mistakes used to go to my dog, Missy, who never complained. She'd take a bite and sample it. But mostly friends and neighbors. When I have a book in production, I certainly do. I have several dinner parties. Prepare families for all phases of deployment with information, and information that enhances the quality of their life as members of the mobile military lifestyle. We make sure that when they arrive to the base, they have information about the surrounding area, as well as programs and services available to them as members of the military. Probably the availability of support programs online. There's one called Military One Source that I particularly favor, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A military spouse who happens to have a job, which 98% of our spouses do, as opposed to 30 years ago when 98% of the spouses were at home. He or she can get online and find services and programs that they need. Probably graduating from law school, and my husband was very supportive of that, and it was again a mobile, while he was on active duty, he took a remote so that I could stay and finish law school. So that was a lifelong dream of mine, and despite being part of the military, I was able to achieve that, and the military helped me do it. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.